r/NoSleep. Posted by u/alyssagalloo. My coffee shop turns deadly after dark. I'm not entirely sure how I got myself into this situation, but it seems to have just happened completely organically. Before I even realized what was happening, my coffee shop became a house of horrors when it got dark. It had taken me years to save enough money to put down a deposit on the space of my dreams. After years of business classes, working double shifts at a local restaurant and saving every penny, I finally opened up my coffee shop coffee stop in one of the most sought-after locations in my city. I had no doubt that my return on investment with all the foot traffic this area experiences would happen quickly. Those first few months were tough though. We were open for a few days before a customer even stopped in. That's partially my fault though. Marketing never was my strong suit and I guess no one knew about us in the first place, so no one made an effort to stop in. With a little bit of time, some carefully crafted signature drinks and some happy hour discounts, business started to pick up, and we finally were not pulling losses at the end of the week. It was at that point I hired some more help, and was able to take a step back and manage the shop quietly on my own. I usually staked out a booth in the back with my laptop and paperwork, and handled what I needed to while quietly observing the ebb and flow of customers in and out of my shop. People watching in the back was my favorite part of owning the shop. I love the constant flow of people in and out of the shop, the personalities and the way that they all experience coffee differently. We had multiple different roasts, and I made sure all of my employees were versed on the different notes of each, so that they can help our customers really find that one drink that they can't get enough of. The day that everything changed started mundanely enough. I got to the shop at 9 a.m. after the pre-work rush to help relieve my baristas while they caught their breath after the influx of customers. After making a few drinks and wiping down a few espresso machines, I picked my usual booth, grabbed my laptop and worked on some financial items while watching those who came in and out. It was at about 11 a.m. that I first noticed her. She was a normal build, about 5'9", and nothing really stood out about her physical appearance. That is except for her hair. It was the first thing I noticed about her, which is probably what rendered the rest of her features so unobservable. Her waist-length fire red hair was slightly wavy, and cascaded down her shoulders and framed her face perfectly. She never tucked it behind an ear, never brushed it out of her face. It's like the hair had a mind of its own, and she just allowed it to do what it wanted. Now I don't usually make it a point to stare at someone because of any physical aspect, but I just couldn't take my eyes off of this woman and her hair brighter than some fires I've seen in my day. It was because of my incessant staring that I noticed the subtle nuances of her visit. She first stepped in the front door, which set off the bell I kept poised over the front door, which originally garnered my attention. Once fully inside of the shop, she just stopped. She slowly came to a halt, and looked around her in a full 360-degree circle. That wasn't super out of the ordinary. A lot of locals come into the shop just to see what the space has turned into, so I figured we just piqued her curiosity and she decided to stop in. Once getting the full lay of the land however, she started to visit every table and booth that we had, regardless if there were people sitting there or not. She hurriedly walked from table to table, booth to booth, hunched over as if looking for something on the ground. Sometimes she'd look under the table itself and sometimes she would check out a table and then just scoff and walk away. After about 5 minutes of watching this and noticing how it was freaking out the other customers in the shop, I steadied myself to get up and politely ask her to take a seat somewhere or hit the road. As soon as I stood up however, her eyes found me immediately. I've never felt a stare like that in all my years. Her eyes were a deep, chocolate brown but there was something behind them that I couldn't, and still can't quite describe. Her gaze held me almost completely frozen in place, and her face contorted into a couple of different emotional expressions before landing on one of excitement. I could have sworn I saw a flash of anger on her features if only for a fraction of a second. She noticed me back up slightly, and took that as her cue to leap forward toward me. She almost collided with the booth I was seated behind as I immediately sat back down at the sight of her lunging toward me. "You," she yelled in a sing-songy voice. "You must be the owner of this fine establishment, am I right?" How she knew I owned the place was a mystery to me. There was no indication that I was anything other than just another person sitting with a laptop in a coffee shop. I carefully weighed my options before answering her. I could just lie, and say that this wasn't my shop, but she clearly was looking for either the owner or someone in an authoritative position, and I didn't want any of my employees to deal with that either. So I took a stabilizing breath, poised both hands palms down on the table and answered with a firm yes, I am. "What can I help you with, ma'am?" As soon as the word yes came out of my mouth, her eyes widened, and her smile got even larger as she answered, "Oh good. I have a proposition for you, as the business owner, and I'd very much like to rent your space for an event. Every Tuesday night, at exactly 8 p.m., and I'll pay handsomely to do so. Never mind that the whole situation was weird. I don't rent out my space, we're not even open past 3 p.m. and I wasn't staying all night to host an event in my space. Opening a shop at 5 a.m. every morning gets tiring and I go to sleep around 8 p.m. most nights. I'm sorry ma'am, I countered. We don't do any sorts of events here. Her smile didn't even drop and her eyes got even wider as she responded, oh, I see. I can offer a lot of money, you know. I have $1,000 per Tuesday to rent your fine establishment for only a few hours. $1,000. That was a lot of money for someone just starting up a restaurant, especially for someone with a mortgage on a commercial space, employees and other expenses. How long will you be here for on Tuesdays nights, and how long do you expect to have this continue for? I countered, narrowing my eyes with suspicion. I don't even care if she saw my emotions flitting across my face. I was skeptical that this was as good as it sounded. Oh, only a few hours, and we'll be here every Tuesday for the foreseeable future, I'm sure. Here, I have a $500 deposit for you today, and we'll give the rest to you on Tuesday night. As she finished her final sentence, she whipped a stack of 5 $100 bills out of her pocket, and shoved them hastily into my hands, prying my right hand from its still steady position on the table. I'm glad we have a deal, dear, and I'll see you in a few short days. She called over her shoulder. As I was looking at the money that all but appeared in my hand seconds before, she had already turned and moved toward the door, obviously satisfied with what had just happened. With another look over her shoulder, she beamed a smile at me, and waved ferociously at me as she walked out the door, the bell ringing again to announce her departure. I stared down at my hands again. $500. It didn't seem like a lot, but it would really go a ways to helping my employees, to helping myself with the business. I tried not to think too hard about keeping the shop open late on Tuesdays, or supervising whatever it is that she needed to rent my space out for, and just focused on the income this was going to bring me. Never mind that I didn't seem to have much of a choice in the matter. I told myself that this was a good thing, and that I was grateful for the opportunity. I shook my head, put the money away in a pocket, and didn't think about it again until Tuesday morning. I really had forgotten all about our deal until about 3 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. I was getting ready to close up for the day, rinsing out the machines, wiping the floors and counters, when I suddenly remembered that I might as well not, because I'll be here again at 8 tonight. I flipped the sign to closed, and went home to take a nap and eat dinner before returning again that night. Returning to the coffee shop gave me the equivalent of a punch to the gut. I was hit with a sudden wave of anxiety, threatening to bring up the dinner I'd just ate. I swallowed down the bile, and quickly scolded myself for being so silly. It was probably just a book club for some rich ladies from a nearby neighborhood. I unlocked the back door at 7:30, flicked on some lights and made my way up to the front counter to start getting the machines ready for the coffee I was most likely about to serve. As I moved slowly toward the front, flipping on lights and machines as I went, I yelped with surprise as I glanced toward the front door and saw just a pair of eyes gazing back at me. It was that same intense stare that she had had a few days ago, those chocolate brown eyes filling me with such a sense of cold dread that I couldn't look away. I moved toward the front door, and let her in the front door. Her eyes never leaving mine as she flitted into the coffee shop, her blazing red hair bouncing around her with every step she took. "Oh good," she said in a quiet but sing-songy voice that didn't match the person I had met just a few days ago. "I was worried you wouldn't show up and that we wouldn't be able to have her right tonight." "I'm sorry, I thought we said 8 p.m. I started, but quickly realized the word she used in the previous sentence. "A right?" I asked with a tilt of my head. I'm not sure that I've ever heard anyone actually use that word in a serious context before. "Oh yes dear," she said again, not actually paying attention to me, but moving quickly to push away tables and clear a path into the middle of the shop, where she moved everything out of the way to form a circle of just nothing. The tables and chairs helped form a circle, with just a pathway to and from the door. I figured I didn't want to know, and with a large sum of money waiting for me tonight, it was better I didn't ask questions. I just went back to my work behind the counter, catching a flash of bright red out of the corner of my eye every now and then as she was a flurry of activity. It was at 8:01 that her guests started to show up. I realized that I didn't even know her name. I knew nothing about her, not why she wanted my coffee shop, not what she wanted to do, or even who she was. Dread started to hit my gut as the first people started to trickle in the door. Every person walking in was wearing a dark black cloak with a pointed hood. I felt like I was watching a movie, as more and more of them just filtered through the door. I told myself this couldn't be real, actual people don't dress like that, right? But it seemed like people did actually dress like that as more and more of them came into my coffee shop, filling up the circle around the one red-headed person I recognized. At 8:05, they were all present, and my patron, the woman with the red hair, whipped around in a circle to see everyone once. She almost squealed with excitement as she clasped both hands together right under her chin and squat down just a bit, only to bob up a half a second later. Welcome, everyone. I know this has been a very long time in the making, and some of you made an incredibly long journey to be here, but I am happy to announce the preservation of our race. We are no longer taking a backseat to our journey here, and will be forging ahead with passion. There were no replies to her rallying speech, but a few of the figures did shuffle a bit as if impatient for what was about to happen. Without further ado, she started as she snapped her fingers. I looked to her expectantly to what was about to happen and noticed that at the snap of her fingers, she was no longer where she once was, but a long rectangular table was now in her place. She appeared standing on the table, still squealing with excitement as each figure approached the table slowly, as if waiting for something. As it turned out, they were waiting for someone, not something. A hop down from the table and another snap of her fingers and a small, mousy-looking blonde girl appeared on the table. She had a blindfold over her eyes, a gag in her mouth, and her hands and feet were tied together. She was laying flat with her back against the table, with ropes so tight around both her and the table at her chest, waist, thighs and ankles that the small amount of thrashing that she did was to no avail. I almost gasped as I saw her appear before us, but quickly realized the obvious danger I was now in, and ducked behind the counter, giving myself just enough space to peer out with one eye to see what was happening. With the girl's appearance, the hooded figures drew even closer, crowding her until no space around the table was empty. The woman with the red hair seemed to fall back as they drew even closer, and once she was about 5 to 6 feet from the table and the girl, she cleared her throat. It seemed almost painful for some of the figures to rip their attention from the girl laying on the table before them, and as they all turned toward the red-haired woman, the girl on the table let out a whimper. If it was from pain or fear, I couldn't tell, but my heart was racing as I could hear my pulse thrumming through my head. I could hear the blood rushing and my heartbeat was in my throat as I realized it was not going to end well for the girl on the table. The host of whatever rite this was, had everyone's attention finally. She cleared her throat once more for good measure and simply said, "Feast, brothers." On her mark, each of the hooded figures turned back toward the girl on the table as another whimper left her throat through the gag. Slowly, so painfully slowly, they each bowed at the waist and lowered their heads to the girl. All I heard next were low guttural moans, squeals of delight from the host, and I shut my eyes harder than I knew I could. My heart was still beating almost out of my chest, and I was sure someone was just going to hear my pulse and I would be next. The red-haired host cleared her throat a third time, and I gathered the nerve to open my eyes. There was absolutely nothing on the table. Any evidence at all that there had been a bound woman on that table was completely gone. The figures were once again backing up from the table, and I swear some of them seemed a little larger than before, though whether that was from fear distorting my memories, I couldn't be sure. "Thank you, we'll see you next week," she said quietly, and each hooded figure quietly waited their turn to file out. When the last one had finally left, I turned and with my back against the wall couldn't dare to let a breath escape me. "Thank you, dear, for use of your fine establishment," I heard directly above me. The woman I had made this original deal with was standing over the counter, leaning directly above where I hid, her face turned into a wide smile with her eyes as piercing as ever. "I'll see you next week as well. Oh, and don't worry," she said over her shoulder once again while readying to leave, "I'll make sure it's never your turn on the table. As long as our agreement holds, that is." The bell rang again announcing her departure, and I leapt over the counter to lock both the front and back doors. I've been too afraid to even leave the coffee shop, and will probably just sleep in the back tonight, if I can even sleep at all. I have absolutely no idea who or what those hooded figures are, who that blonde woman was, or how to prevent this from ever happening again. I only have a few days until Tuesday to figure it out.